All right, welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I'm your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 125, recording on Tuesday, November 4th. The trade deadline was not electric here locally. We're going to talk a little bit about it, why the Vikings did not make any moves. We'll get into that in detail over the course of this podcast. Also took some questions from you guys via social media that I will dive deeply into, coming off of what was an awesome environment game in Detroit between the Vikings and Lions with JJ McCarthy back. Was pumped for it, really honestly too amped. I mean, I was telling some of the media members I was sitting next to that I had to calm it down, but it was good to feel that, probably like you guys did settling into the couch or at a bar or whatever. You probably felt just the energy of what was possible. So I'll talk all about that throughout this episode. If you're new here, we do this 2 times a week. I cover the Vikings every day for The Athletic, theathletic.com. I work with a phenomenal staff over there. This is my 4th season covering this team, and I do not take it for granted. This show is an extension of the job that I get to do, being in the building every day. And if you're new here watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a ton. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or iHeart or wherever you get your podcast, you can rate and follow and all that stuff. It helps us out a ton. The show is presented by First Resource Bank. That is a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area. Tim Siegley, who runs the thing, was pumped on Sunday. He's like, finally, we got to see what this roster that we envision looks like. And Tim was right. I mean, there's no doubt. Andrew Van Ginkel was back. JJ McCarthy was there. 4/5 of the offensive line was available. And Tim got to see what he wanted to see, what we've been talking about over at the bank when I go over there a ton. So please check out First Resource Bank. Great people, care about the community, and they're fans of this team. The show is also sponsored by Unreal. And I've got a little prop if you're watching on YouTube. That is not just a prop. I mean, it's one of the coolest hoodies that I've owned, probably, that I've gotten to own. Vikings logo, Vikings lettering. I mean, it's like a track jacket. You can wear it in the rain. You probably hear it, but it's great. And Unreal is a locally owned clothing company that they produce some of the coolest stuff that is not just NFL and Vikings oriented, but they have these limited edition drops, and that hoodie is the second drop of the package, and I'm going to put the link to that in the description. These things sell out like hotcakes because they do come at a limited number, but I can't say enough about them. And yeah, like I told those guys when they're like, talk about sponsoring the Alec Lewis Show, I'm like, I support the brand just because I like what you guys do. So Unreal, the limited drop. The second one is out. The link to that is in the description. Some person's probably on YouTube in the comments going to yell at me for talking for 3 minutes, but it's the drum roll, guys. Like it's, we're not just, we got to get into this. You got to get ready for the podcast after you beat the Lions and move to 4-4. And I'll start there. I mean, before I get into questions, like legitimately, it was, I came on this podcast last week and I said, these next 10 games it's JJ McCarthy's time to show, to prove, to remain healthy, and to just kind of get back into the swing of playing at game speed at this level. And I mean, it was really, really cool to see him just get embraced by his teammates, embrace that moment in the locker room after that the Vikings put out the videos to that, and then asking him about it post-game, for him to have the raw emotion that he did. I wrote a lot about this, and I've talked a lot about it, but you cannot, like I said this to somebody the other day. He's 22 years old. He wasn't able to do the thing that has become such a part of his identity for a year because he tore his meniscus. And although he was in the building and Kevin O'Connell met with him for an hour, I mean, there is a difference between that and being the quarterback and being a part of a team, which is how it's always been for him. And so that had, he's talked about how hard it was. Then you enter this season, there's all this hoopla, you're hyped to no end. training camp, every step you take is monitored by people in my position because you guys who listen to these shows and read the stories that we write want him to be the player that you've looked for so long at the quarterback position, understandably. And so he's hyped coming out of training camp. The week one, he goes home, plays the Bears, is the hero at the end of that game. What an end performance, is the player of the week, which we could talk about that another time. But you go from hyped to hero. Then you play the next game. Excuse me. Before you even play your second game in the NFL at 22 years old, you have a baby boy and you miss a day of practice and you're sleeping in the hotel and you're excited about the growth of your family. And then you play in the second game. It doesn't go great. You suffer the high ankle sprain. And then you come out of that and learn via multiple opinions that to get back fully healthy, to have the best chance, you're going to need to miss some time again. And so what I told somebody the other day is like, it's hard enough just being a 22-year-old in life. And yes, we're all of us, you guys listening to me, circumstances range from backgrounds to, all of that stuff is markedly different. And when you're J.J. McCarthy and you have the money and, you've been the guy at Michigan, like there's awesome aspects. But these guys, I say it all the time, and it's part of why I do this job. These guys are human beings. They navigate things. And so it's tough enough being 22 and navigating everything that it comes with at that time of your life. And then you toss in, the swirl of emotion and whiplash and, microscopic lens that's being trained on you at all times. Like it's a lot. And so to see him come back and have that type of experience with these people that he wants to prove himself to, because like that's how it is in these locker rooms. It was pretty cool to watch and to see it up close and to see him, have the emotion that really felt like just gratitude of getting back to being able to do the thing that he loved to do. Now, like we can talk about the performance, and I guess that is what we will do right now. By no means did I think what he did was perfect, but the entire vision for this season was this roster is going to be so good and the coaching is going to be so sharp that he doesn't have to be perfect. He can make a certain amount of plays a game. He can thrive off of the design of the offense. And then over time, the more he experiences, the more he develops, the more comfortable he is in the system, the better he and the entire operation will operate. And so, like, Sunday, you're making up for lost time that you haven't had to get more to the more comfortable place. And I thought, early on, the third down, J.J. McCarthy makes the check against an all-zero look. It's the screen to Aaron Jones that converts the 3rd and 9. That was a huge play after, obviously, Miles Price sets it up with field position. And then you've got, like, the early plays in the game of him drifting to his left and finding Jordan Addison down the field. Could the throw have, if we're nitpicking, could he have placed it further out? Yes, but he's drifting to his left, which was feeling the pocket correctly, and that was a very impressive throw. The throw to Justin Jefferson, giving Justin a chance. Would you like there to be a little more air under that ball? Potentially, but Justin Jefferson is so good that all you have to do is give him an opportunity, and he did that, and Justin made the type of catch that Justin Jefferson makes. The touchdown throw to TJ Hockenson where he's booting to his right and TJ settles in the space in the end zone and he finds TJ. Like that's a good throw. There were a couple, three really impressive throws to me. One was obviously the game ender to Jalen Nailor. Just a perfect back shoulder throw. Hell of a catch by Jalen Nailor, which didn't surprise me at all with the way that he's just played all season, really. And it hasn't been perfect for him either. You'd like to maybe have him catch that ball that's a little behind him that was intercepted on Sunday. But that throw was really impressive. The game ender. There was a throw where Justin Jefferson's in the backfield. He runs a little flat route to the left. And then Jordan Addison runs a little corner route. So the read is like, J.J. McCarthy's looking to his left. Justin's not there. Then he throws an on-time, in-rhythm, anticipatory out route throw to Jordan Addison. Really good throw against zone coverage. Is it like, the crazy big-time throw blow you away? No. But it was an impressive throw in rhythm. And then even more than that for me, and in real time, I was like, holy cow. From the left hash, Justin Jefferson runs this, what they call it, a shake route, where you don't have a lot of guys who press vertically, look like they're darting to the post, and then carve it down to the right the way that Justin Jefferson did. And J.J. McCarthy on that throw from the left hash to the opposite sideline throws an anticipatory ball to Justin Jefferson. And so those three, I thought were really impressive. Again, by no means was it perfect. And there were a lot of times where J.J. McCarthy drifts out of the pocket, and it just felt like he was too amped maybe, and the ball sails high. There were instances where, there are times where it's just like Justin Jefferson's in the flat right there. Throw it right there. Just get him the ball. If it ends up being a 2-yard gain and Justin's wrapped up, fine. But more often than not, you get the ball to that guy's hands and things go really good. I thought, there were times where the accuracy, and the numbers bear this out and the film bears it out, where the accuracy was, you're like, that's one where you just prefer not to spray. And then I'm always just watching the layering and can he put touch on the ball, specifically after he's gotten hit on certain throws. So, again, it's one of those performances where, if the circumstances around him are what they were and are what the vision of this team kind of had, that's what it was supposed to be, and he can make those the amount of throws that he did in his first game back from an injury where he missed 5 games, you feel pretty good about it. I consistently, and when you're a beat writer, you're pretty objective. You don't really opinions it doesn't really feel normal to say something like this where people are consuming it. But I have had to consistently remind myself that he is still 22 years old. He played much less college football than all of the guys in the 2024 draft that he's been compared to ad nauseum. There's just a lot of layers. Are the circumstances far better than what Drake May had in his first year? Yeah, absolutely. Are the circumstances better than even what Bo Nix had in his rookie season? Yes, but still, this stuff takes time, and we live in a day and age where, time isn't often allocated. And this is a game, this is a league, this is an industry where patience often dissipates because of how emotional things get. And again, I started this point by saying I've had to remind myself, because you get caught up in it and there's a lot of stuff swirling and there's a lot of stuff going on. I just felt like, it's something I wanted to say. But, all in all, I'm just very curious to see where it goes. Over time, does the accuracy outside the pocket improve? Over time, does the layering become more consistent? Does he become less amped because he's been in those environments and kind of knows how to handle it and manage it? All that stuff for me is going to be really interesting. But I talk about this stuff in the quarterback position at JJ, and I'd be doing myself a disservice the more I've watched this thing. You just can't separate quarterback performance from offensive line play, and it wasn't perfect. There were a couple times Will Fries was beat. Brian O'Neill, he's in a dogfight over there often with Aiden Hutchinson. But when you had the 4 of the 5 guys that the team's brass envisioned having, with Donovan Jackson at left guard and Christian Darrisaw for the full game at left tackle, you just give yourself a better chance. And there were some instances where running back pass protection with Jordan Mason wasn't great. I've been a big Jordan Mason advocate from the time they acquired him, but part of the reason that the 49ers were probably okay parting with him is because, the pass protection, is kind of a question mark. So a lot to take out of it, but the dude is 2-0 on the road in the NFC North. And the last time I checked, winning the games is what matters more than anything else. So, again, we'll just be very curious to watch him on a weekly basis. And there is like real juice and energy for me showing up to the stadium every Sunday, watching a progression at this position in this environment. It's a pretty cool thing to get to watch and witness and observe on a weekly basis. So that's where I'll end it, probably with the JJ analysis and the game analysis coming out of the game. I do want to get to a bunch of the questions you guys had. That was, it's about the defense, the game plan, Dallas Turner. Man, what else do we have? We've got Jonathan Allen's players who have outperformed internal expectations, run defense questions. Someone even asked about Asante Samuel. I'll talk a bit about all of that in a second, and that second is right now. All right, the first question comes from Cade Delisle, who is typically listening to the show, and I appreciate you for that, Cade. Cade also communicates often on social media, which is fun. If you're not doing that, you can find me at Alec_Lewis. And then our show's accounts are Alec Lewis Show on Twitter and Instagram. But I'm always available for questions. So when you got them, toss them my way. I appreciate the communication. It's what makes this job fun. Cade, the first thing he asked was curious about Dallas Turner's decrease in snaps and the increase in defensive success relationship. The first thing I'd say is just, Dallas Turner only played 14 snaps. So, yes, his snaps did decrease, and the reason for that, and you know this, Cade, and you guys listening know this, but it was because Andrew Van Ginkel was back from the neck injury. And for me, the increase in defensive success was more about Van Ginkel's presence than Dallas Turner's, I'm not going to say absence, but his lack of presence, I guess. The more I watch Andrew Van Ginkel, and not having watched him and then getting to watch him, the more appreciation I have for, not that I didn't already, and not that you guys don't, for how special of a player this guy is. And it's not like this crazy physical, component. It's not this unbelievable speed that you'd measure at the combine. It is just like a football feel on the field that, it's part of my fascination with sports in general. Is like, can you teach a guy's ability to react to what he's seeing in split seconds? Or is that just an innate, mental strength that certain guys have? You watch Andrew Van Ginkel, and it's often like, is he a cyborg? There's a play in the game where he's rushing the passer on the left side of the line of scrimmage, and he sees Jared Goff's eyes. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see me do this. Go from right toward the middle of the field. And Van Ginkel just pulls off from pass rushing on the left side and floats over, following Jared Goff's eyes, and almost tips the pass in midair, which is, you don't see stuff like that. There's another play where he spins into a stunt, and he's rushing the passer on Penei Sewell on the left side, and then he spins, and you're like, whoa. And it just so happens that the spin opens up a lane for Jalen Redmond to come around and create a sack. And you watch the play and you're like, is he just ad-libbing, or was that planned? Turns out it was planned. So not surprised with the Viking staff that they would be creative enough to think that he could execute that. But the other aspect that I want to talk about, and I'll get to Dallas Turner, Cade, but with Andrew Van Ginkel, is so much of the Vikings game plan on Sunday against the Lions necessitated Andrew Van Ginkel. And you guys might be like, why? Well, so much of what the Vikings did was on some key downs, they would drop the edge rushers into this underneath zone, and then they would blitz the off-ball linebackers straight up the middle through the interior, causing problems for the Lions' interior offensive line and for the Lions' running backs in pass protection. And so you guys might be like, why do you need Van Ginkel for that? You could drop edge rushers all the time. Well, part of the reason Andrew Van Ginkel is so you're so confident dropping him from the line of scrimmage is because he's so good in coverage that he erases those underneath routes with the feel of knowing who's running in front of him, behind him, and where the quarterback's eyes are. And so, like, not only are you occupying space, but you have a guy who has feel in that space to adapt on the fly. And so that was so much of the game plan. And then, I mean, beyond just an extension, I'm going to get a little bit more to this, but like when you have the off-ball linebackers blitzing with the success they have, and you have, you know, the edge rushers dropping who can erase that space, you have a pretty freaking good game plan, especially when you haven't shown anything like that. And you have a quarterback who's not really evading in the pocket. So I just like Andrew Van Ginkel. It's cyborg stuff. It's like X-ray vision. He's like Andrew Van Ginkel is like. It's almost as if he's playing with whatever in Spy Kids or that movie where you got that one side glasses that just like identifies everything. That's how it feels like Andrew Van Ginkel plays the game. And so again, Cade, back to the initial question, the defensive success was so much more for me about just him being present than it was Dallas Turner not being in there. Now, I've written about Dallas Turner and I've talked a lot about him. I feel like this season, just as a player, not taking into account draft position, all this stuff, like he's been solid. He's definitely explosive off the line of scrimmage. He's able to drop off the line of scrimmage and play in coverage. He's set the edge. He's improved at that area of the game, I feel like. And the effort is there with him. But again, and I said I want to remove the draft position. I mean, it's pretty difficult in the total calculus to remove that in terms of what the Vikings allocated to acquire him in the total evaluation. You would hope that he's like changing the game. And the way I've described it is, and I talked to an executive that I'm close with, in the AFC about this. And it's like, when you're talking about guys and how dynamic they are, it's like, if you're the opposing coordinator, is that a guy you're standing before your players in the meeting room being like, we're putting the bullseye on this guy because of how much he can change the game. With Jonathan Grenard, you can tell with how much opposing offenses are chipping him and mindful of where he is that's the case. With Andrew Van Ginkel, with the lack of screen passes you're seeing to his side, that's the case. With Dallas Turner, I just don't think he's there yet. And again, he's also young. It's still year 2 for him. You gotta have patience and time, while also understanding that when you acquire a player with the amount of draft capital they did with Dallas Turner, there's a tug of war, push-pull with allocating time, being patient, but also wanting it. And then you also know the players drafted after them who have performed really well. So that's how I'd answer that question, Cade. I don't know if that, suffices for it, but that's kind of where my mind is when you ask that. The second part of the question, Cade, you said, can you provide potentially a roadmap for playoff entry with the remaining bye? And I like, the Athletic has a playoff generator right now, says 20% to make the playoffs. Let's just do this real quick. So like, let's say they win they beat the Ravens this weekend, then it jumps to 30%. Okay. Then you beat the Bears. Then it jumps to around 40%. Then you beat the Packers on the road. Then it jumps to around 60%. I'd say, like, if I go game by game, this Ravens game, probably going to be very difficult. The Vikings don't think they're favored in the game. So, like, you say they lose this game. Let's say they beat the Bears. Packers game, let's say it's a dogfight. Let's say they win just because. Then they lose at Seattle. I mean, your playoff odds at that point, you're around 25%. So, look, I think the Commanders right now, that's going to be a very winnable game. Their defense is aging for sure. We'll see where Jaden Daniels is by that week. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks from now. It's hard to imagine him with that injury that he suffered Sunday night coming back and in that short of time span. The Cowboys, they obviously got better in acquiring Quinnen Williams and Logan Wilson, but that defense, I mean, it feels like one interior defensive tackle, and then a linebacker on one of the worst defenses in history in the Bengals defense. I'm not sure how much that's going to do. The Giants is a winnable game. All the division games I expect to be close. I mean, rarely over the course of Kevin O'Connell's time here have they just gotten obliterated in the division games. Obviously, there was the Packers game at home with Jaron Hall as the starter. There was the Week 18 game last year against the Lions. But even that game, I mean, you're a couple red zone opportunities from it being close. So I told a buddy before this recent stretch, like I kind of expect the Vikings to win some games that you wouldn't think they might win, lose some games that you might expect them to win. It's kind of played out that way. But look, I mean, this team, if Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, this will segue nicely to the next question, but if Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen are giving what they gave on the interior defensive line and the offensive line's healthy, and the Vikings can run the football, they're going to be in the fight. That's just the case, especially with how versatile their game plans typically are on a week-to-week basis. Again, Kate, it's not probably the most direct answer, but I 4-4, Commanders, Cowboys, Giants, you win. I mean, there's a path to 10 if you can get real, be real airtight. And we'll just see how that kind of goes. The next question comes from Eddie Shore, and this, the segue is right to Jonathan Allen. Eddie asks, why does it seem like he's invisible? Is there injury concern, lack of fit in the defense, or poor production? I actually would say this with Jonathan Allen. The splashes aren't really there in terms of one-on-one pass rush wins, sack production, high quality sack pressure consistently. You don't see a ton of that on the film, and maybe you guys listening are like, well, we paid him for that, so that's got to show up. But I'd say for the most part, his run defense has been definitely solid. The effort is there. He's been double teamed 30+% of the times according to Next Gen Stats. So the one-on-one opportunities have to be there for him to shine in those. I looked this up. His 10 run stuffs, which is an eye-popping run metric on Next Gen Stats, it's second in the NFL behind Quinnen Williams for defensive tackles. It feels like on the film he's held the point of attack pretty well. So yeah, I mean, it's really a matter of if the expectation is he's going to be because the Vikings spent this money that he's just going to win in one-on-one pass rush, quick pressures all the time. You're not seeing that, but I feel like everywhere else it's been pretty solid with Jonathan Allen. And at this stage of his career, given the age, I'm not sure how much I expected a ton more. I'd say until this past Sunday, Javon Hargrave was more of a liability in run defense, and then wasn't giving as much from a pass rush perspective. But, his snaps increased Sunday, and he definitely had an uptick in both areas, I felt like. So, yeah. Next question comes from Jackie. What did Jackie ask? Man, I skipped over it. Hold on a second. Just bear with me. Jackie D. To be candid, my question is born out of a lack of time to watch the All-22. Listen, if you're watching the All-22 anyway, bravo. I mean, you guys deserve credit for that. And that's the type of fans I know you guys to be. But would love your take on what Flores was doing in the secondary that seemed to confuse Goff so much. I mean, on the rewatch, it's really everything. So much of it is kind of what I already talked about, where you're dropping the edge rushers, but then bringing 4 via the 2 off-ball linebackers. And it's not just you're bringing 4. It's, one's coming this way. They're cross-dogging. Graham Glasgow struggled to kind of, come off the initial defensive tackle. Jahmyr Gibbs was almost kind of taken out of the game because of the pass rush stuff. I thought Eric Wilson as a blitzer was spectacular. And Blake Cashman had, I mean, what a game Blake Cashman had. He had the forced fumble, obviously, but I believe it was 14 tackles and just the presence. Like, when you have his diagnosing ability mixed with Andrew Van Ginkel's, I mean, that's that's why last year's free agency period, it really should go down as, I mean, I was talking to another executive for a team this past weekend, and it was like, how sustainable is the type of free agency they had last year? It's not sustainable at all, but that you see it when they have all those pieces in Grenard and Cashman and Van Ginkel, of how special it is. Back to the initial question, what was he doing in the secondary beyond those mechanics on the front? I mean, it was a lot of stuff. Like, there's an early snap where you've got 3 high defenders and it becomes like a Tampa 2 type of coverage with 2 deep defenders, and Fabian Moreau, a cornerback, was running the middle field player. So, like, there was the classic Flores mix and match coverage stuff, pre-snap, post-snap. There were a couple or few cover 0 snaps where the Vikings are just blitzing everybody, and it's Harrison Smith off the edge. Believe Harrison had a pass deflection. I mean, there was a red zone snap where, there was a double team on Amon-Ra St. Brown and some man. So, it was really a mixture of a lot of different stuff. More of the, coming out of the Chargers game, and I had a lot of buddies texting me of, man, what Flores, we're used to, it just felt like the Vikings were dictating the game by the way they structured their game plan and by the way they were affecting Jared Goff and getting him out of the spot and making him second guess. And then, we saw this last year with Sam Darnold. When you're struggling in pass pro and you start to, worry about who's coming from where, then you get antsy, your accuracy suffers, and it becomes it's like a step-by-step unraveling for a quarterback in the offense. So, but I really felt like, Jackie, to the initial question, it all started with, we're going to bring these cross dogs in the interior, kind of take out Jahmyr Gibbs, and we're going to drop Van Ginkel and Grenard, which obviously was not the expectation. So then you have numbers and coverage because the tackles are expecting those guys to rush. And you're kind of covering the outlets of where the team offense typically wants their hot throws to be in the short, kind of near the line of scrimmage areas of the field, and you've got Andrew Van Ginkel covering those. So just a really, really good plan at a really important time. Tim asked a great question. Let me find it here real quick. Among the young players on the roster, who has most outperformed internal expectations? I thought that was an interesting question. I'd say, Eric Wilson's 31 years old. So is he a young player? But of all the signings and all the additions, if there's anybody who's outperformed probably what the internal expectation would have been, it's him. I mean, he has the second most pressures on the team behind Jonathan Grenard with 19. If you told anybody preseason that was going to be the case, I just can't fathom that. I just know that would not have been the expectation. Blake Brandel stepping in at center, that's maybe another option, but I know that Blake Brandel had a really good camp. There were a lot of the staff was really not impressed because they expected it, but they were satisfied with how he performed, knowing that Donovan Jackson was stepping in and that would probably push him. So Blake had a really good camp, and there have been people internally who have felt like his size mixed with his acumen could work at center. That's been something that people have thought internally. And now he's just had the opportunity to prove it. Has it been perfect? Absolutely not. The Jalen Carter game was rough, but you have to imagine the more time in there, the more, similar to JJ McCarthy, the more feel you probably are going to have. So it's one of those other things for the rest of the season that I'm just curious to watch. How does Blake Brandel, acclimate to that position, and can he do what he did Sunday, which was definitely hold up. Jalen Naylor coming out of camp, I'm not sure if people would have expected, with the hand injury, that he would do, what he's done just in terms of play most of the snaps and be as consistent as he's been. But part of the reason Adam Thielen has played as I mean, he has 5 catches for 47 yards is because Jalen Naylor just opens things up. He gets open in one-on-one coverage and against man. He's a willing blocker in the run, in the run phase. So, I mean, he's a guy who kind of I thought about. Jalen Redmond has had a hell of a year. And if you're listening to this, I'm going to have a story at The Athletic this week about Jalen Redmond that I really hope you guys read and think you guys will appreciate it. Spent a lot of time with Jalen, people around him, and just a hell of a freaking story, man. But like, even in training camp, I was communicating with people internally who were like, this guy has taken a step. Like, he has taken a step, and he was good last year. So, not sure how much that surprises. And then Levi Drake Rodriguez, there was optimism too. Now, the numbers on his run-stopping ability blew me away. I mean, it's up there with some of the best in the NFL among defensive tackles. So I'm not sure if the tape validates those numbers. That's why it's so important to watch the tape and kind of pair those two together. But yeah, I mean, he's been good. Purple Nurple asks, was our improved run defense due to schematics or just guys playing better? More than anything, it did feel like it was just fundamental technique. The coach speak that Brian Flores has used a lot, but is true. Like, felt like the linebackers flowed really well to the ball. The interior held the point of attack, specifically Javon Hargrave. There was a lot of strong side, Jalen Redmond kind of playing the end next to Andrew Van Ginkel. And so though that is a schematic decision and the mechanics of that definitely played a role. But I'd also be remiss if I didn't say that, like, the Lions interior is a question mark. It has been, it will continue to be. But Glasgow at center, Tate Ratledge, the rookie at right guard, Christian Mahogany, the former 6th-round pick from last year. Like, I mean, if you looked at any of the advanced metrics before that game, the Lions' run offense has not been nearly what it's been in the past. And so much of that for me, it feels like an offensive line conversation with the run game. So I don't like, and look, the Vikings were really good in run defense, so it's not taking anything away. It's something I do want to mention. Couple more here. Someone asked about Byron Murphy. Thought that was a good question. Let me try to find it specifically. Let's see. Yeah, Carl Johnson. He's asking why does Byron Murphy taking a decline? I'd say, the missed tackles have stood out more than anything else. There have also been, I mean, look, I guess I say that. A.J. Brown got him in one-on-one coverage. Amon-Ra a couple times Sunday. Part of me thinks the Vikings are playing more coverages, not specifically man, but just like more matchy stuff where it looks more man to where you can get a little more exposed as a corner. So that's part of it. I'd also say, like, I know it's 9 games and Byron Murphy has played every game, but I just kind of want more sample. I think there have been a few pretty loud plays that stand out. And then I also just think, like, when you're not stopping the run defensively and you're in some situations, it's just really hard. So I'm not covering for Byron Murphy. I do think the cornerback position is something, we've talked about going back to the training camp. The Vikings did not make a move today, even though there were I tweeted this. There were considerations made, and that was one of the positions that I was watching pretty closely. I want to do more just, evaluating Fabian Moreau and how he looked Sunday. But I wrote this too. The Vikings only play with 3 cornerbacks on the field like 20% of the time. And so, like, that's not a position that you really need to allocate major draft capital, major spending money for depth specifically. I'll say that for depth when that's the case. That's not to say that if the Vikings don't feel like they need an ad, they won't do that. And that leads us to the final question, which has been asked before, and we've talked about it before, but after the trade deadline and with the reporting of that Jeremy Fowler had that Asante Samuel has kind of been cleared after spinal fusion surgery. Excuse me. Tom Gers asked, any interest in Asante Samuel? Well, if you're asking me, like, I'm fine with that, sure. But if you're asking about the Vikings' interest, look, like, it sounds like he's going to take some visits. I really don't want to get aggregated. A little tired of it. Even though I respect what those guys and girls, if they are girls, do. But I mean, look, the Asante Samuel Jr. one is interesting. We'll start with this. Again, he's coming back from spinal fusion surgery. It's probably pretty difficult when you haven't had a training camp to come back from that and be thrust right into the fire. So, like, what are the odds this guy can just ramp up and be thrust into game and you have a lot of confidence there? Like that's the first question mark that I would have, and that people internally I'm sure would have. The other aspect is he has not been an exceptional tackler on the edge. And I know, like, with the question about Byron Murphy, that's obviously something on the minds of you guys probably. And like, it's obviously going to be an emphasis internally. And so that would be a question mark with him. Now, I'll say this about Asante Samuel Jr. He reads it out well. He can play man zone. Like, you know, I don't, he's represented by David Mulligetta. I don't know what his asking, David Mulligetta, for the uninitiated, David Mulligetta is one of the most prominent NFL agents, and has a ton of clients. And so, yeah, like, what is Asante Samuel Jr. going to want, and what is the market going to look like? If it's like a very minimal signing, total prove it, and you're bringing in a 26-year-old and allowing him to ramp up, and maybe you need some depth by week 14, like, that would totally make sense. If it's a $6 million type signing where you're having to allocate more dollars knowing what's coming down the pipe from a cap perspective, like, then, you know, I can't imagine that the Vikings would jump at something like that in the event of some serious injury. But, like, there's reasons why, and again, this is purely speculation, so I mean, you can aggregate it, whatever, but, like, there's reasons definitely why I would understand the Vikings doing that. There's also, if the cost got to a certain place, I think there's reasons, you know, why they wouldn't. The Vikings have been very open about the fact that, you know, they felt comfortable in their cornerback room going back to training camp. And obviously Jeff Okudah has, you know, Jeff, it's not been, you know, his performance has struggled at times. He's also right now dealing with a concussion, and that is always something that is, you know, you got to be mindful of. But that's kind of how I'd lay out the Asante Samuel Jr. situation. From a defensive scheme fit, like, it makes sense to me. From an age perspective, it makes sense to me. The Vikings have not been afraid to sign players coming off of injury, even though this is a very different injury in a spinal fusion. So from that respect, it makes sense to me. But have I heard anything about it? No. Is it pure speculation from me? Yes. Is it worth talking about? I think it's worth, you know, having this conversation about. And then we'll see. Like, if the Vikings brought him in for a visit, then the conversation would obviously ramp up. But yeah, that's about it for the questions. I thought they were great. Thank you guys for tossing my way on social media. Again, if you're not following, at Alec_Lewis on Twitter, at Alec Lewis Show on Twitter, Instagram, you can find us there, and we appreciate that. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to the show. Episode 125, presented by First Resource Bank, sponsored by Unreal, where you can find hoodies like this one, if you can even hear me anymore, but I'm showing it on YouTube. It's a beautiful hoodie. I don't wear these you know, Viking stuff because I'm an objective journalist, but I've got friends chomping at the bit for these hoodies, trying to allocate them the right way. And if you're new here, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, listen on Apple or Spotify, read the daily stories over at The Athletic, not slowing down. I mentioned the Jalen Redmond feature, but think you guys will enjoy that. Easy dude to root for, I'll tell you that. But that'll do it. Thank you guys for being here. We'll have another show later this week previewing the Ravens game after I do my film deep dive, look at the metrics, all of that nerdy stuff that they pay me to do. But yeah, thank you guys for being here, talk to you very, very soon.